It's great to see everyone attended there today. Firstly, I'm just going to give you a little introduction to myself because I'm aware most of you won't have met me before, and then a quick little introduction to Rachel, our speaker, and then we'll have plenty of time for a Q&A at the end. So my own name is Monica Mullins, and I'm a Climate Action Officer with the Climate Ambassador Programme of An Taisce. So our Climate Ambassador Programme has trained over 1,200 individuals all across Ireland since we launched in 2017, and we're funded by the Department of Environment, Climate and Communications as well. And I just want to do a special thank you for Rachel, our speaker, for joining here today. So Rachel is a field ecologist. She has a background in ecological management and conservation biology, and she is also a former climate ambassador. So it's great to see that full circle of Rachel coming back to us today. And she's previously worked on the Freshwater Mussel Project, and she brings valuable experience in freshwater ecology, and she has a particular interest in water quality as it relates to sustainable agriculture and forestry. And this is very exciting. More recently, she started working as a project officer with the Restore Ballymacraven River Association. And we're absolutely delighted to have you here today, Rachel, delivering this training. And if you're ready, I will hand it over to you. Thank you.
Yeah,
thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Monica. Thank you. Hello everyone. I can't see anybody, but it is nice to know that there's so many people here to learn about freshwater ecology today. So yeah, that's the name of the session, Intro to Freshwater Ecology. We're going to keep it quite light and basic, and just touch on some sort of overarching topics got to do with freshwater ecology. So a quick intro about myself. As Monica mentioned, I'm just started working with the Restore Ballymacraven River Association in Clare. But before that, I worked with the Pearl Mussel Project down in Cork and Kerry. And in between, I've worked in along the Nora and the Barrow doing the National Kingfisher Project. So since I did my college degrees, I've sort of always been drawn back towards working either beside or in a river, which is great because I feel like it's a great metaphor for the connectivity of so many different environments, from the mountains all the way down to the sea. You've got forestry, you've got farmland, everything is always connected by rivers, and so it's a great symbol for that. So it's really interesting to me, and I hope it will be for you guys as well. So yeah, the session layout is just going to be pretty simple. We're going to do an introduction to freshwater ecology, a couple of different topics on that before rolling into the threats and pressures, of which there are many, but that we'll learn about soon. And then we'll learn about monitoring. So how we go about monitoring the health of our rivers, how we can go out into our rivers and learn more about the health of the systems overall, and what helps us learn about that in the meantime. So what is freshwater ecology? It's a big question. And I think one of the ideas I want to get out to people today is that it's kind of, you have a lot more intuitive knowledge maybe about rivers than you might think. So yeah, freshwater ecology is all to do with the study of our rivers, our lakes, our streams, our canals, and other freshwater bodies that may include ponds or other things. So the ecologist, like myself, is going to be focusing on the biotic features of the river. So that's going to be our plants and animals, and how they're affected by human interference, and how they're affected by the conditions around them. So it can be very complicated, as I said, because everything is connected at the end of the day. And so basically, if we're studying a freshwater body, the variance of life that it can support will indicate to us how healthy that freshwater body is. So if we have a river that only has one type of animal in it, that's going to be considered a lot less healthy than a river that can support hundreds, for example. And so monitoring these kind of factors over time lets us study the change, and that's very relevant in terms of climate change, like risks that are put forward because of human interference, and also anything that might be happening upstream that's affecting things downstream. That's really important to consider as well as a freshwater ecologist, that if you're studying a piece of river that runs through a farmland, you have to be aware of the environment that the river has just passed through to get there as well. So it's being impacted this whole way down from its cycle, from the mountains down to the sea. And so why do we care? It's pretty easy to me to think. I mean, pretty much all of our towns, our villages, and everything between have been built around our rivers. Our rivers have been built around an old Irish fishing culture and farming culture, and they've been a real focal point for communities for hundreds of years here. And I have listed here Dukas as a resource, which is really interesting, as a folklore collection. So you could put in the name of your local river and get a million things back. I had here a little story from the Ina River in County Clare, which talks about this little story of a serpent being in the river that had to be banished by a priest, I think. But it just goes to show that these are really, really important to us. We've developed whole folklores around them. But I think people are very quick to forget how are like they forget how, like, it can be very easy to be disconnected from our rivers basically, and think of them as just this sort of stagnant thing that you bring your dog down to jump in and catch a stick, when it's really its own being. It's carrying so many different kinds of life, and unfortunately they're pretty much all in a declining state of health, which we'll talk about in a second. And unfortunately, people are more likely to be driven to action after something terrible might have happened to a river. So what we want to do is inspire people to be curious and passionate about the rivers the whole way through, and not just as a response to something tragic that might have happened. And I have a picture here from the fish kill from the Ballymacraven and An Taisce, which forms the association that I'm working with now, as an example. So yeah, it's not nice, but hopefully that will change. So I have a true or false here, which probably is not going to work too well because I can't see any of the participants. But Ireland has more than 73,000 kilometers of river. I'm going to give you a couple of seconds, even though I can't see you. But yeah, so true or false, think to yourselves. So that's true. And if Ireland's rivers were placed end to end, they would almost encircle the earth twice. So true or false? That is also true. Is Ireland the only country in Europe with a riparian reptile species? That one's false. Monica might remember this from the talk I did before. 44% of Irish rivers were in moderate or poor or bad health in 2024. True or false? That is true, and a truly terrible statistic. And of this, 22% were in poor or bad health. And unfortunately, that is also true. So you get a bit of a picture there. We have a lot of rivers, and a lot of them are not doing very well. So what does a healthy river look like? This is going to kind of come back to the sort of intuitive nature of, what you might think of as being a healthy or poor river system. So I'm going to give everyone like a couple of minutes just to imagine, even though I can't see you again, but just to imagine just close your eyes and trying to imagine a part of the river that you've liked visiting in the past. So take a second to take note of what you can hear. Take a look and try and see what sort of vegetation might be under your feet. What animals can you see with the naked eye? What kind of flow does the river have? Is it fast or is it slow? And yeah, just really try and take it in. And imagine what the river banks look like. Are you surrounded by trees or otherwise? So I might just give you a second to do that. Okay, just going to move along here now. So if any of you were thinking of, some of you may have been thinking of some fast flowing areas of the river, and some other people may have been thinking about slower flow areas. And both are valid depending on what stage of the river you're at. So this is two sections of the lower Ballymacraven, very close together, but they both have different flow states. So if you would have thought about the faster flow area, this water is really highly oxygenated. It's usually shallower, and it's flying down. So it might be coming down a waterfall, like in this picture. And what this means is that you have a lot of smaller animals, your what we would call rock clingers, including your stonefly and your flat mayfly, larvae living under the rocks, clinging on, filtering through particles in the water. And what they're really important is they act as a vital part of our food web. So all the way up, these animals are incredibly important for feeding our bigger fish, and other animals that are involved with the river as well. So then you go down here to this slower flow area, and you have these big, deep areas that are much less oxygenated than the faster flowing. But these can act as, these are the sort of greenhouses, these are growing our big river plants. They're growing these areas of shade, shelter, and habitat for our larger animals. And that will include our salmon and fish, and pike, and all these wonderful kind of animals, as well as being our main fishing grounds for otters and, herons and all these things you might see when you're passing by. So both are really important, and you shouldn't have one without the other. So as long as there's flow, that's always going to be a good thing. So on to the next part. So if any of you may have thought about the ground under your feet, if you're surrounded by trees, if you're surrounded by shrub or any kind of bushes or plant material, this is what we're calling the riparian margin. And this means this is the land that's beside our rivers, riparian meaning of the river. So this is an incredibly underrated and vital part of this system for a river. And it's often land these days it'll be owned by private landowners or farmers. And as well, like in this picture I have from Torque Waterfall in Killarney, could go through our national parks as well. So basically, the riparian margin is acting almost as the eyelashes of the body. They're filtering this system. They're getting out. They're helping the water quality. They're catching on all and clinging on to all of this debris that can include your runoffs and pollutants, oils, and all these things that are incredibly important. But as well as that, it's reducing the sedimentation and siltation in the river, which we'll talk about a little bit later on. But it's really important to have a healthy amount of siltation and sedimentation when it comes to filter feeders in our river. So I would think that a lot of our megafauna, so our large animals in the river, really rely on a healthy riparian margin. And that can be for a number of different reasons. So the plant material that may fall in, as well as in some cases providing food for the animals that are living in the river, also act as a place for shelter and for shade. And this is really important for salmonid species, for young salmon and trout. Even at the egg stage, the leaves that fall from trees into the river act as an important shade barrier. And there's been plenty of studies done that have shown that salmonid populations do a lot worse in areas where there's no tree cover either side. So it's really, really important that they have this continual organic feed into the river. And also it's important that it's keeping a lot of things out. So I just have it highlighted there. So just have a second maybe to think about what are some threats that might face the riparian margin. Maybe just coming back again to think about how this area is so heavily owned by private landowners. And in a lot of cases in rivers, there mightn't be any riparian margin left. Maybe the place that you talked about earlier, there was no riparian margin and you're just standing on a bit of shallow grass or clay or something. But yeah. So what does a healthy riparian margin look like? Like any ecosystem, what you want to have is a variety of different species, and you want to have a variety of different heights. So you have your damp, wet loving, river loving tree species like our willow and our alders and our rowan trees that'll be often seen down by the river. And then you'll have more like oak trees and beech trees on better drained soils further up. As well as that, a developed understory of scrub and hazel is really important to keep that variety of leaf litter, that variety of different habitats available to as many different invertebrates and other animals as possible. But important to note here as well that I have written down that it has little to no invasives. In a lot of cases, even the sort of idea of no invasives at this rate is kind of unrealistic nearly, but you'd want to have as little as possible and having as little of an impact as possible. And invasives will come up later on as well. So what's this doing? These trees are, as well as like acting as the eyelashes and keeping from debris and excess sediment from coming into the river, they're also binding the riverbank together and making sure that it stays as this habitat. And when you remove these species, the soil and the sediment becomes a lot looser. It falls into the river and affects the things that are living in it, but it also reduces that habitat either side of the river too. And that's actually a really important message to hone in on for when it comes to your riparian margin with farmers and private landowners as well, that this idea of maybe livestock accessing the riverbank right the way down to the river can be very, very harmful, but also a very manageable problem to get around as well. So yeah, the trees are improving the water quality of the river and also providing habitat above and below the waterline for the animals to live. So just have a little diagram here that shows just how important that riparian margin is. So all the way down, it's sucking up these bad things we don't want to be into our rivers. So yeah, really, really important. So I have a little game here. Once again, I can't really see anybody, but that's okay. I think it's going to be pretty easy. So we have our grey heron here. Does it require a healthy riparian margin? The answer is yes. Our otter absolutely requires a healthy riparian margin. These guys, as we just said, yeah, really important for them to have a healthy riparian margin. Kingfisher, a bird close to my heart, needs really healthy riparian margins to keep his little chicks safe and because it lives in the banks as well. I think you might be catching my drift here. So yes, we have and our dippers. Our dippers definitely need a healthy riparian margin. So everything does. It all comes back to the riparian margin. So moving along then to our threats and pressures. And as we've talked about earlier, we have a very high amount of poor, moderate poor, and bad water quality rivers. And that's because we haven't really given them enough grace, I think, over the last few years. And I think maybe things are starting to change. But yeah, it's an uphill battle. So I have a little diagram here from Law Pro on the main pressures on water quality, and we can see here that agriculture really is holding up the majority of the data on this one. So that's why in the last few years there's been such a push on agri-environmental schemes that focus on increasing water quality on farms. So it would include the Pearl Mussel Project, which I worked on before down in Cork and Kerry. But also Farming for Water, the Waters for Life EIP as well. I think more recently, I think that one might be outdated, but I'm not sure. But there is more of an interest and there's more of a pressure being put on now to improve water quality on farms, which is great to see. But invasives is a huge threat and pressure to our rivers at the moment. I'm not sure if there's anybody from Clare here that might have been at the Ballymacraven, but there's a problem with cherry laurel there. There's problems with invasives pretty much everywhere. And I think it's important to note that the invasive species, there are non-native species that are also causing harm to our native plant species or animal species in the area. Some introduced plants and animals don't have as much of an impact as others. So I have a list of here some highly invasive ones that we might see along rivers, which include the giant hogweed, our Himalayan balsam, Japanese knotweed, and the cherry laurel. So in a lot of times, these plants are out competing our own native plants. And what that means is that they're growing faster, they're growing bigger, and they're they're succeeding, they're growing more abundantly than their native counterparts. And when these, like the giant hogweed or the Japanese knotweed and the cherry laurel, they grow mighty, mighty big and completely choke out the light for our native plants to grow. And it could become a very monotonous, like a monopolized ecosystem there, where you're having a Japanese knotweed dominant area, which has nothing else and supporting nothing else, and is damaging the integrity of the soil all the while. So it's really important to note that invasives are so dangerous, especially as well, like Himalayan balsam. They're not just dangerous to the ecosystems, they're also often dangerous to us as well. So you really have to act with a lot of common sense and caution when you're dealing with invasives. So as a surveyor, if you're going out to survey, you have to be very, very careful to make sure that any materials, your PPE, your shoes, anything that you're wearing that's going in and out of a river must be cleaned. And especially any work on invasive species should never ever be carried out without professional training. And in most cases, these sort of works are going to be carried out by professionals anyway. It's not really going to be done from layperson to layperson. There are some, like, there are some exceptions to the rule. Sorry, like we would remove cherry laurel in the Restore Ballymacraven River Association, but anything Japanese knotweed, anything that involves chemicals is going to be carried out by professionals, and should always be approached with total caution. And don't just jump in and start cutting anything with a secateurs, because you could be making a problem much, much worse. So agriculture is listed as a threat and a pressure. And as I said, there are a lot of schemes now that are trying to improve the relationship between agriculture and rivers and environments in general. And I think the important thing to note with agriculture is that there's so many problems, but that they are so easily rectified when it comes to increasing your water quality. So there's some pictures I have here, but even simple things like fencing can be the difference, can make the world of difference when it comes to including improving your water quality. What you need to do is just stop animals accessing the river, to stop things like this, like your bank erosion, which is really, really bad for our riparian margin and our water quality, and to have more enforced fencing structures. So they're easy problems. I'm not going to focus too much on that at the moment, just because I'm not sure what maybe the spread of people might be in the group today. But even simple measures like putting up trucks away from the river, and just giving animals the opportunity to get water away from the river can make such a difference. I think this idea of putting the right action in the right place is incredibly important when it comes to land ownership, and treatment of specifically livestock as well, with your when it comes to rivers. So forestry then is another issue, which mainly will impact siltation, sedimentation, and acidification as well of your soils. So any of these large Sitka plantations are not only taking a lot of water kind of to feed the trees that are grown there, but also they can also come with the use of pesticides, which can run off into the river, and also acidify the soil at the same time. The Sitka trees tend to acidify the soil, so that all is negatively impacting our water quality, and also adds a lot of sediment in as well. And you will see kind of silt traps in drains and stuff in Sitka forest, but it doesn't really have the effect that you would need it to have on if you consider the scale of plantation forestry, for example. So I have a picture here, just kind of talks about the Clare as a case study for the different sort of impacts on our water quality. And you have there that agriculture and forestry make up almost half of the entire issues there. Sorry. So it's a really, really big problem, but also easy to fix. So yeah. there's just a little bit here about the runoffs and debris. So this is going to impact our living communities in the river, and it's going to decrease our water quality. And it's just like this idea, as I said here, that you have this your something happening upstream. So if there's a forestry upstream, that's going to really greatly increase sedimentation and siltation all the way down the water table, the water stream, sorry. So we'll move on now to monitoring, which is probably a little bit more, maybe a bit more exciting for everybody. So we're going to talk about a few different kinds of bioindicators and why certain ones are better for studying the health of rivers than others, and all this kind of good stuff. So forms of monitoring, I'm going to briefly talk about electrofishing, but it's not something that I've ever practiced before. This is how people study and monitor fish populations in the rivers. It's a really highly specialized survey method that's carried out by professionals that have been really trained up properly to do so. I've never done this, but yeah, I think I just wanted to put the note here that these that this is the fish that are being electrofished are not supposed to be stunned as such, but they're supposed to be sort of corralled by an electric field to go into a net and then re-released safely into the water column. So that is what should be happening with electrofishing. So that's used to monitor a fish species, so our fish and our eel and our lamprey and all these great animals that are living, but yeah, carried out by very, very highly specialized. It's not something that would ever be done by a citizen scientist or even a run-of-the-mill ecologist or freshwater ecologist like myself. So yeah, our bioindicators. Bioindicators are absolutely paramount to studying freshwater ecology and forms the basis of our understanding of the health of an ecosystem. So they can range from anything. You're talking about from the tiniest animals all the way up to the biggest animals you might see, but some of them are easier to study than others. So we have here that insects and mollusks are listed, but as well as that, our otters would be considered a bioindicator, and a lot of like our birds, like our kingfishers, would be as well, because they're not going to be lived in very degraded habitats. And that's kind of the thing to cling on to, is that you have some animals that are generalists and others that are specialists. So some animals will be happy out living in sort of any kind of body of water that is in any way able to sustain life. So there'll be a lot of sort of like regular, a lot of sort of worm species and invertebrates. And then on the opposite side of the scale, you have some really highly specialized animals, which are really adapted to live in really pristine conditions and won't survive without them. These are the animals we'll talk about now in a second. So by studying the difference between the spread of animals in these environments, we're able to understand the health of the river that we're talking about. So if we have a ratio of generalist species, we'll say that maybe the river is not so pristine as a river that's able to carry a lot of specialist, highly specialized animals. So yeah, some are pollutant tolerant and some are not. So I want to have a quick shout out here for the freshwater pearl mussel, my first species highlight. And the freshwater pearl mussel is an animal that's very close to my heart, because I worked with the Pearl Mussel Project down in the southwest for the last 9 months of the project, which was about 5 years long. So these are incredible animals that are living in our most pristine water bodies, and they're mussels like you'd see in the sea, except they're living in our rivers, and they can grow maybe around to the size of my hand, from the bottom of my wrist to the top of my finger, up to around 30 centimeters. And they're very slow growing animals that require pristine water conditions to be able to feed. So what these animals do is they put their filter feeder mechanism out into the water like this, they wave it around, and they feed from the suspended particles in the water. And they live until they're 120, which is amazing. But because they live so long, they don't reach sexual maturity for a long time either. So it's kind of like these sort of animals are a lot harder to conserve, because once you wipe out a population of sexually mature mussels, it'll be many, many years, 50 years or so, before the next will come in. So this means that what the word we'd use is recruitment is very, very low. Um, so it's a complex lifestyle as well. These are very, very complicated, and they don't look like very complicated animals, but they're very complicated lifestyles. They're kind of like the divas of Irish rivers at this point. And it's worth noting here, 50% of the freshwater pearl mussel population of Europe lives in the west of Ireland, and it's only in the west really anymore, but the total population has declined by 90%. So what you have is this population of freshwater pearl mussels is clinging on to Cork and Kerry, Galway, Mayo, and Donegal, because these are the areas that are least impacted by intense agriculture. And that's what the Pearl Mussel Project was all about. So I have here a little diagram about the life cycle of the freshwater pearl mussel. I'm not sure if many of you would have heard of them before. Maybe you have, but basically the life cycle includes a stage where the glaucidia, or the young mussels, have to cling on to the gills of a salmon or a trout for around 9 months. So that means that obviously these mussels need healthy salmon and trout populations in order to sustain themselves as well. So you can't really have one without the other. And it's a good symbol as well for this connectedness of our riparian systems too. So it takes a long time for these to mature, and it is just a difficult story from the point of view of a conservationist. But yeah, you have a little bit of a spread here of the distribution, but you can see it's heavily in the west more than anywhere else. So the project itself kind of was a results-led project for farmers that were in these stronghold counties, where you were able to put these right actions in the right places in order to increase water quality for the mussels. So what you're trying to reduce, when you think about the mussel, it's filter feeding in the water. You're trying to reduce the silt and the sediment coming into the water in order to increase the water quality. So this has got to do what we talked about earlier, about putting up the troughs, about putting up proper fencing and building riparian margins to sort of just to put that barrier between the animals and the water, as well as that proper manure storage and spreading slurry at the right times, and all these were all really, really important for the Pearl Mussel Project. And the project itself was was overall entirely, it was like totally positive between farmers and between the landowners and the scientists, which can be hard to come by, but it was really, really good because it was quite laid back in this term of like, you just want to put the right action in the right place and give the farmers the opportunity to be incentivized to put these structures in their farms. So they would have been given the money to increase the fencing on their farms, or even in some cases to change the breed of cattle they might have had to a breed that mightn't have been having such an impact on the riverbanks. So it's really interesting. And I just have a little slide here about the outcomes, where you can see the increase in the habitat quality, but also the increase in how the opinions of the farmers changed over the years. So it was really, really brilliant project to be a part of. And I think one of the things that one of the farmers said to me at the very end was that there was no more diggers being seen around South Kerry, which was really brilliant, because it was a big problem at the time. Digging drains and draining bogs and all this would have been a much larger problem on the far side of the Pearl Mussel Project than it is now. So that's a huge win for water quality in that area. And it's like it's an easy thing to do. And you just have here that the percentage of farms that are presenting risks of water courses had decreased from 25% to 9% between 2019 and 2022. So I think that's a huge win. And you can see that the habitat scores went up as well. It's just it's quite hard to study the the actual populations of mussels themselves, because they have such a slow and such a long life cycle, and for many years before they settle in this, like before they become visible, they're living on fish, they're in the sediment, they're tiny, they're the size of your fingernail, so they're very, very hard to study until they're mature. So the best way that we can come up with results from a project like that is to look at the water quality and see, what kind of actions we're taking on the ground. So now on to our kick sampling and our Q values. So might be the main reason why everyone came here today. So we have here just a general spread of different water quality levels, which range from high, good, moderate, poor, and bad. And so we had our 44% of Irish rivers being in moderate, poor, or bad quality at the moment, which is in our yellow and red here. And what we would love to do is kind of switch that sort of statistic in the opposite direction. But yeah, so our kick sampling is very intuitive. It's easy to do. There's a CSSI method here, which I have listed. So what you're doing is you're kicking and you're getting samples. So you go down to your river, you'll have your waders on, your clean waders, you'll have you have a white tray, a net, and you might have some magnifying glasses, and you'll have your sheets out. And what you're doing is you're stepping into the river, ideally kind of between, you're looking for a bit of a variance of different study sites, and you're going to stand in the river, and 3 times over for 30 seconds you kick upstream and let the sediment and water flow into your net, and then you're going to whoosh up, grab the net, and then dump it into your sample tray. And we did this a couple of weeks ago in Ennistimon, and it's always super, it's super interesting. I think even if there's not anything terribly interesting going on, where you're dumping it, you mightn't see anything for a couple of minutes. You think, oh God, I don't know if there's anything here at all. And then if you leave it for 5 minutes and take a look down, you'll slowly start to see some different creatures crawling out, and it's like a whole different world. It's like you would have had no idea. It's a great way to really get in tune with just the amount of life that might be in a river that you would have no idea. If you looked across, you wouldn't know at all what was there. So what you're looking for is the presence and the absence of our bioindicator species. So in this instance, what we're looking for is bioindicating invertebrates. So you're looking for our bugs and beasties. We have a list of these coming up now in a second. So basically, as we said earlier, we have a mixture of our sort of pollutant tolerant species and our pollutant intolerant species. So we have some generalists and some specialists. And what we want is for the ratio of our specialist species to be higher than that of the generalists. So then what you're doing is afterwards, we are going to take a picture of the tray, and you're going to mark it and mark your relevant species where possible. And all the while, we're going to be checking for biosecurity hazards, making sure that everything is clean, and that the risk of transmission of any invasive species is reduced down to an almost zero. So yeah, when we have a bioindicators, we have a list of what we're calling the good guys and a list of what we're calling bad guys for our bioindicating invertebrates. And you have here that we have +1 for good guy and -1 for a bad guy. So here they are. This is going to be another interactive part of the talk. But yeah, we have our good guys, which are going to be our stoneflies, our flattened mayflies, and our green cassid flies. And I think when the trait comes out, you might think, oh no, I mightn't be able to tell what's what, but it actually becomes very apparent when you're out there and you get a bit of experience in looking at the trays. It's very, very clear to see. especially the green caddisflies, Monica, aren't they? They're very brave, bright green once you see them crawling around. Really cool. So they're kind of like, they're basically like sort of green algae colored caterpillars, just like jumping around in there. And our stoneflies and flattened mayflies, they are yeah, they're very, very identifiable once you have the time to take a look in the tray and compare to the rest of the things that are there. On the opposite side of the spectrum, then we have our bad guys. So we have a mixture here of our leeches, our snails, and our water louses. So our water louses are basically like wood lice that are living in the rivers. Our leeches and our snails. So these are animals that are able to withstand a lot of pollution. So you want, if you find a watercourse that has more leeches, snails, and water louses than stoneflies and mayflies and cassidflies larvae, then you can be pretty sure that the river is tolerating a lot of pollution at that time. Now, there's a lot of other animals as well that aren't scored for the CSSI because it's basically just makes everything a bit more confusing. So we have our freshwater shrimp, different kinds of mayflies, our swimming mayflies, and our pink castlefly larvae as well. But I think that the others are so easily identifiable that it becomes pretty apparent once you're looking in the tray, which is which. So yeah, here's our last little game of the session. We have our good guys or bad guys, so play along. Oh, whoops. I'll give you another second to look at it before we start. Now, good or bad? That is our flattened mayfly. It's good. Our green castlefly larva. Good. Green for good. Freshwater shrimps. Freshwater shrimp are indifferent. Our leeches. Leeches are considered bad guys. Stonefly larvae. Good guys. I'm sure you're all doing very well. Our snails are considered pollutant tolerant or bad guys. And our water louse. Bad guy. So well done, everyone. I assume. Now, I just want to pop in another species highlight, another sort of an invertebrate bioindicator, but is not used in our studies, and that is the white-clawed crayfish. The last time that I did this talk, I think that a couple of people in the talk had never heard of the white-clawed crayfish, so I just thought I'd throw it in there because it's an interesting animal, and I think a lot of people mightn't realize that they live in our rivers. So the white-clawed crayfish lives in our freshwaters, in more pristine river systems and more calcareous, so more calcium rich, softer water bodies. That's because they use that to build their shells, or their exoskeletons, I should say, and they can live up to 10 years long. Unfortunately, though, they are being absolutely obliterated by a crayfish plague. So I think for me, the time that I've seen them the most is when they've been washed up on shores. I think I remember seeing them, the Blessington Lakes in Wicklow, a lot of them washed up on the shore during lockdown, I think, because the plague had been really like taken hard on them. They don't have an invasive counterpart at the moment, but we're hoping that that's going to stay the same way. But the risk of invasive species coming in is always apparent and is always abundant. But yeah, I just thought I'd throw in the white-clawed crayfish there because it's sort of a lesser known animal of our rivers. Kind of seems a bit exotic, I think. I don't know. I think it does. It seems a bit tropical. So yeah, I just have a list of resources here for everyone. So there's actually such a huge amount of resources available for people to get information on their rivers. LawPro being the main one. LawPro is always amazing for any sort of really digestible and accessible information for members of the public. But as well as that, inland fisheries, catchments.ie is great. But also like there's often local groups that are working at trying to improve their rivers and the community around the rivers. So have a look into it and see. But the amount of information, honestly, it comes from so many different directions. It is in itself can be quite confusing. But yeah, also the National Biodiversity Data Centre, if you want to know about the spread of any of animals in your local rivers or local areas, just always have a look at those species leagues because they're so helpful. But I'll also be doing an information sheet that can be sent out to people just to make the whole kick sampling section a bit more clear, because we are a little bit pushed on time there today. But yeah, record what you see, make note of threats and pressures, and if you see anything sort of illegal activities happening on your rivers or your water courses, report them, because it's so common to see illegal activities on the river, and they're very, very ill reported, and they're always having a big impact on rivers. And that could be from landowners, that could be from anglers in the wrong area. Just report that and record the things that you do see. If you see any of these bioindicating species, if you see otters, kingfishers, white-clawed crayfish, any of them, record them on the National Biodiversity Data Centre, because there's undoubtedly that data is being used for studies in the future. And I think citizen science is really important for projects like that. So make sure to try and get involved with that. It's also quite a nice and interactive way of getting to know more about if you're out on a river walk or anything like that. It just really enriches the experience for you and for the ecosystem that you're spending time in. So yeah, I'll be doing an in-person training on Sunday. That's in An Taisce in Clare, so I don't know how relevant that is for you guys. But just to make sure to bring appropriate clothing and shoes, and yeah, we'll be getting down in the water and having a look at all the positive indicators and coming up with their own score for the river on that day. So yeah, thank you very, very much. I think it's gone okay. We have 10 minutes now for questions as well at the end. So I'll open it back up to Monica there.
That was amazing, Rachel. Thank you so much. I actually have loads of questions, but we have a good few here in the chat too. So thank you so much for everyone sending them in. So I will start with Amy, is it? Sorry if I'm mispronouncing that. So how wide should a riparian margin be?
Okay, so that can really, really depend on the part of river that you're studying, to be honest. In my experience working in agri environment, you're looking for around anywhere between 20 and 90 meters. But healthy riparian margins, riparian woodland should be very, very thick. So it kind of really depends on the part of the river that you're studying. But you do want to have riparian margin at all stages of the river. So that's important, but the thickness of it will vary depending on where you are. If you say the very, very start of your of a river up in the mountains, you would expect to have a lot less vegetation than in the lowlands, for example. But yeah, thanks.
Amazing. So next we have a question. Are damsel and dragonfly nymphs considered as good, bad, or not counted?
So in the CSSI, they're not counted, but I think that they will be considered. I think they should be considered good guys in terms of, like, I wouldn't consider them to be pollutant tolerant by any means. But yeah, for that particular study, they would be not counted. But they are some of my favorite animals to look at. The dragonfly nymphs are just incredible. The way their mouthpieces jump out of their bodies to catch food is amazing. But yeah.
Perfect. So we have a question from Liam. Thanks so much, Liam. Rachel, please say a little about Water Framework Directive, priority areas for action, heavily modified water bodies, nitrates and phosphates, and where things are at in improving water quality nationally.
Big question. That's actually one I might want to come up with. I'm not sure if I have the time to properly gather myself on that at the moment, Liam, but if you want to, I might take your details and send you a bit of a message afterwards, because I actually just don't want to. I actually am afraid that I'll get a little bit caught up on myself there, if that's okay. Sorry.
Perfect. Yeah, Liam, I'm going to drop my email in the chat as well, if that's handier. So we have another question from Amy Kramer. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing that. Good guys and bad guys have nothing to do with invasive species? Question mark. Are they all native or just pollution tolerant?
Yeah, so there definitely would be a couple of invasive pollutant tolerant invertebrates in the rivers, but they're not really considered part of the CSSI. Invasives are sort of considered oh well, I mean, in the general sense, they would be considered bad guys, but outside of that study. But yeah, invasives would usually be studied and surveyed in different ways, and usually on their own sort of standalone projects, as opposed to these ones. So, yeah.
Brilliant. So another one, why do you report, or sorry, who do you report negative activities to?
Yeah, so it kind of depends on what you're seeing. You can report if you see malpractice in fishing, you would report it to Inland Fisheries Ireland. If you see dumping or those kind of or yeah runoff instances, you can report it to the EPA. And in terms of if there's ones that are more like farming based, you can report it to the Department of Agriculture. So it kind of just depends on what you're seeing. And yeah, unless you're seeing something that's like emergency related, but it's usually the Department of Ag, the EPA, inland fisheries, or if it's on a canal, I suppose waterways. But yeah.
Great. And have a couple of more questions. So I've one from Shane in Kildare. Hello, Shane. I've installed two pools to help rehabilitate water birds. And these are waterproof before release. At the moment, I have a filter cleaning the water, but after a few days, the water needs changing, which is not great. I was thinking about using mussels as a natural filter, but not sure, now. Have you any suggestions maybe for Shane?
So it's you have a fresh water pool, is it?
So if I'm right, Shane works with Kildare Animal Welfare. So they work with rehabilitating wild animals. Maybe I
Hmm.
have that right. And so he has a two pools built, and then he has a filter clean the water.
I see.
So these will rehabilitate the birds, but it needs changing every so often. And would mussels be a good alternative, maybe?
What I would say probably is to develop those ponds with reeds and with plants more than anything. Mussels, if you're going, there's no way you could even get mussels into, like, you wouldn't be able to access freshwater mussels to put them in there because you'd be breaking the law. And also, they take like 50 years to grow into like full-sized filter feeders, so that'd be a very very long haul solution. But I think there's been a lot of like reed beds are really really good for improving water quality, so I think that would be a good option. And also I know you might be based in Kildare, but the Burr and Bio Trust in Clare have a lot of good free resources on ponds and that kind of thing. So it would be worth reaching out to get a bit of information, better information on improving your water quality, because it will make all the difference. But yeah, I think reeds, that's the one that comes up for me.
Brilliant. So even I have a mini pond at home, and I have some oxygenating plants in it, and they're amazing. But it's nice to have that bit of a dead pool for other animals too. And so we have a question from Bernie. What about the freshwater water blitz? Is anyone in Ireland coordinating the citizen science monitoring for nitrogen and phosphorus in rivers?
So as far as I know, there's no citizen science project being done on that at the moment. And I'm not sure who would run that if it was becoming a thing. So yeah, I'm not actually sure. Mhm.
Yeah, this is kind of slightly different, but the Big River Watch happens every year in September. So in a follow-up email, I can send links to that as well. So that might be interesting one for people to join in. And
And that's
then
with
we
the
have a
Rivers Trust, isn't it?
yeah, exactly. And the National Biodiversity Data Centre are building a
Mhm.
repository for water quality and citizen science and monitoring with that. Then lastly, Pauline, it can be a huge challenge to report negative activities. Some county councils have a direct contact for incidents of pollution. NPWS also have a role depending on the activity. So that is great to know, Pauline. And then Art, just a question about utilising extensive rock armour for water quality and especially otters and kingfishers. So would you recommend or any suggestions on that?
Um, for me, I think that the best way to keep a great environment for our bioindicators like our otters and kingfishers is to build up a healthy riparian margin. I think in some really extreme cases, building up a rock armor can be helpful, but I mean, I think what we need is healthy sediment that's being bound together by plants at the end of the day. And I think that your two examples there, kingfisher and otter, are perfect examples of that because they need that sediment. They need healthy banks to survive. Our kingfishers, they build their nests a meter in from the like into the sediment of a riverbank. So that's like they need a lot of healthy sediment and a lot of vegetation over top to keep them safe and happy. And our otters are building holts. They're big structures, and I think there have been some instances of otters being able to work around other enforcements. But yeah, what we want to do is build better riverbanks, better natural riverbanks with healthy sediment and healthy vegetation over top, without a doubt.
Great, Rachel. So just a couple of more comments from Pauline. Fish kills report directly to inland fisheries, ASAP. Then Elizabeth was saying you should report to the county councils as well. They can decide what agency to contact next.
Yeah.
And then, yep, Shane Kildare Wildlife Rescue. And then C, it says it app for pollution and complaint. Sorry, see it say it is an app for pollution and other complaints. So that's great,
Yeah.
Bernie. Thanks for sharing. And then DCU did a water unit in the Freshwater Blitz. I'm not sure if they've done anything else recently. So it's great. It's great to know all that. And I think
Great info, yeah.
they are all the questions so far. Amazing, Rachel. Thanks so much. If anyone else does have any burning questions, please feel free to drop me an email and we can answer them in the follow-up email with the recording that'll be sent out next week as well. And I just want to thank everyone for joining us this evening. I know it's not easy midweek of an evening, but we really appreciate you being here. And then if anyone is in County Clare, we hope to see you next Sunday for the in-person hands-on training where you get to dig in deep and see some of these amazing creatures. Any comments, Rachel? Anything you want to say?
I just want to say thanks to everybody for showing up, and I hope to see some of you in person maybe on Sunday to get in on the groundwork experience done. So thank you so much, and thanks Monica for having me.
No, it was a pleasure. Thanks so much, everyone. I hope you have a
Thank
great
you.
evening. All the best.